Being okay, you're live.
Okay.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this live broadcast. I have with me here most Shobolaje Abimbola. I forgot that right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So today we'll be talking about a topic: pandemics, suffering, and God. Right. So maybe we'll just wait a little bit and see if other people join, as other people join before we can proceed. For now, I think it's just zero views. I don't know if you can see it on
Okay.
your end. Yeah. Okay, let's
I
see.
can't. That's so.
Oh, oh, that's strange. Maybe because I'm using
Probably
a
because
trial
I'm
version.
using a browser.
Okay. So let's just wait a little more minutes so other people can join and then
Okay.
so we won't just be talking and then people will join halfway.
Yeah. I get.
Sorry. Um, this people should join now. Um, okay, so still waiting. Sorry for the delay.
Okay.
Um, okay, I think yeah. Okay, some people started joining, so I guess we can start now. Yeah.
All right.
So welcome once again to this live broadcast. I have with me here Abimbola Moshobalaje. He's a pastor with God Carriers Church in Akure, and you'll be discussing with me a topic about pandemics, suffering, and God. Why we are doing this is we want to really connect with a lot of people that maybe they have a lot of questions that need to be answered, right, concerning the current happenings, things that are happening in the world today, and the whole COVID-19 issue and all that relates to that. So we want to really build the conversations, especially from a biblical point of view. Um, what does the Bible say concerning these issues, and also what lessons can we draw and on how to live, especially in this um, kind of times. So basically, that's what we are looking out for. So pandemics, first of all, pandemics, um, outbreak of disease, especially on a large scale, right? So the reason why people call maybe epidemics or something like that pandemic is when the scale has actually increased, when it has affected a lot of people right across the world. So it becomes a pandemic because it has affected more people. So, and most pandemics do come with suffering. I think I just read recently that some staff of a particular bank in Nigeria would lose their jobs, right? And even before that, during the
Yeah.
lockdown, a lot of people who depended on daily pay saw their daily income actually inhibited, and as a result of that, they suffered. I mean, a lot of um, struggle around what to eat and all of that. So pandemics in of itself comes with a lot of suffering, right? Human beings in general, as with most species, we are built to more like appreciate comfort, right? So anything that tends to shift us away from comfort or create a little bit of discomfort um, gets to create a sense of pain also. So people begin to attribute suffering to that or pain to that. So that's what we're going to be looking at to how the current pandemic has been able to affect how people live and then how we as individuals, as believers, how do we respond to it. Pandemics is not new. This is not the first time. In throughout history, you hear about a lot of pandemics: the bubonic plague, the Black Death. At one point, malaria was a pandemic, and even in the Bible, we've seen pandemics in one way or the other. The 10 plagues in Egypt, right, in Exodus, in the book of Exodus, and then the census plague in Second Samuel chapter 24. So we see a lot of pandemics like that occur in the Bible, and these pandemics do come with um, hardship and suffering. When people do suffer or experience suffering, different thing comes to mind. And for many, it is difficult to reconcile the idea of a good God allowing suffering, right? Especially in the midst of the pandemic. I mean, we say God is love, God is
Yeah.
good, God is kind, and then people are suffering, right? In the midst of a pandemic
Yeah.
or outside of a pandemic. So, how can we reconcile that idea of a good God to that? We have a familiar story in the Bible. I think a whole book dedicated to that, the book of Job, that talks about the suffering of one man. So, Abimbola, I want you to actually tell us what was really happening to Job um, in terms of his suffering. How can we really understand what was happening to Job?
Okay. So thank you very much, Nathaniel, for having me. The the first thing to know about Job, well, Job is the first book of the Bible to be written, okay, based on
Yeah.
archaeological records. So there are things that are in that book, or let me say, probably Job recorded the things that happened to him without
Yeah.
an accurate knowledge about about this stuff from people before.
Okay.
You understand?
Okay.
When you are coming
Yeah.
to, you would think, I mean, if there is no, this is you are the first person it is happening to, right? So you would want to account it the way you can perceive it. So that was what Job
Mm-hmm.
did. The the actions that happened to him, he recorded it as something he observed, as something he felt. Okay, so he
Yeah.
felt that God was dealing with him. All right. Many times when
Okay.
people read the book of Job, chapter 1, they feel like Job was a righteous man without. They feel Job was a righteous man without sins, or it was all faultless, like a stainless steel. Okay.
Mm.
But actually, when you read further, when you read, for example, Job chapter 7, then you read also the conversation Elihu had with this guy. Hey,
Right.
you would understand that Job was not actually entirely righteous. Okay, so Job was someone who said he didn't want to speak to God at certain times. Sometimes God would appear to Job in dreams and visions. Job would say that that God was disturbing him in his sleep. Okay, so repeatedly Job had pushed God away and all of that. So when this thing happened, Job thought that God was trying to punish him for certain things.
All right.
Okay, now if I were the one that God, probably I knew God was trying to get to me and I pushed God away a number of times, then something bad happened. Okay, now I would feel like, okay, maybe this is God trying to correct me. So eventually, when his wife would come to tell him to denounce God, and his friends would come and tell him to stop believing God and all of that, based on what you're passing through and what you've ignored, I mean, you've already ignored God in time past. What
Yeah.
do you expect the guy to do? He wouldn't want to do that because he would think, okay, I rejected God the first time. Probably that's why this is happening to me. Now, if
Mm.
I reject him again, what's going to happen? Okay, so what happened to Job was just a natural disaster. Let's just put it that way. It was a natural
Mm.
disaster. It wasn't God trying to correct Job. Okay,
Oh.
so Job had a lifestyle that wasn't entirely good. If you read the conversation of Elihu, I mean, if you start from probably Job chapter 32, you can start reading from Job chapter 32. Okay, so when you read that, you would understand that the life that Job lived, he had affluent friends that were in power. Okay, so
Yeah.
some of them were wicked. then Job actually he associated himself with them. Okay. Now, Job knew the repercussion of associating himself with these people, and he was scared, thinking, I mean, many times he would think that, okay, what if this thing turns out bad? What if it turns out bad? Okay, that was why at a point he could say that eventually what he was afraid of had finally happened to him.
Yeah.
You understand? Okay, so that means there was something that was happening that Job was conscious of, and he was actually scared about. Eventually, when it happened, it just felt like, oh, eventually it is here. Okay. Then he felt that was God trying to correct him. So that was just Job's opinion. Now, Job was not, okay, for example, when you read Job chapter 1, when he said that temptation, that the devil came before God and he was trying to tempt him and all of that and all of that. I've made a Facebook post before, and I know you saw the post. And in that post, I said the conversation never happened. I said the conversation never happened. Why? God and devil would not be in the same realm. God and devil would not have the same conversation. Okay, if you read the book of Second Corinthians, okay, is it chapter 6 now? When Paul was asking that what fellowship has righteousness with unrighteousness, what relationship is there with Christ and Belial? Okay, now Belial is another term that is used for the devil. See that simple question: what relationship does Christ have with Belial? Now, how would Christ and Belial or the devil agree on the same subject to do something to someone, to punish someone? Now, if God would ever agree with the devil to punish anyone, then that means God himself is scary. That means that God is not to be trusted. I mean, and that's the kind of God some people claim to give you put your life in the hand of that God. And then you feel like, okay, if I'm putting my life in the hand of this God, I don't know what will happen, right? So if believing in God does not guarantee safety, why not just not believe in him anyway? So it's just a situation of either you believe, bad will happen. If you don't believe, also, bad will still happen. So it really does not make sense. Okay, that conversation was just Job's assertion, his opinion about what he thought happened. Okay, I'm going to read something. When God was eventually going to respond to Job, which I believe was God speaking through Elihu, in Job chapter 38.
Right.
Read from here. Job 38. So God answered Job, okay? And the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, who is this who darkens counsel by words without knowledge? So Job darkens counsel. It darkens the counsel of God by speaking without knowledge. Okay, so in the whole of chapter 38, 39, 40, and so on, God kept talking to Job. Now, when Job was going to respond to God to this particular question, Job responded in Job chapter 42, verse 2, verse 3 actually. Job 42, 3.
Yeah.
Okay.
Meanwhile,
Job
you guys
chapter
can
42,
ask
verse
your
3.
questions. Okay.
Okay, so Job was talking now. You asked, who is this who hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore, I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. Do you see Job's response? He said he had uttered the things that he did not know. That was his response to God. Now, that means most of the things that Job said about God were out of sincere ignorance.
I like that was sincere ignorance.
Yeah, it's sincere ignorance. You understand? Yeah. It's just like if you know something for the first time, if you're coming to know about something for the first time, you could say that I'm trying to think about something. You could say that there is no question that you ask Google that you will not get the right answer, right? Mm-hmm. Because the thought is that whatever you ask Google has so much database that When you ask a
Yeah.
question, there will always be an answer. Okay, but while that is true, while it is true that you will always have an answer, it is not true that you will always have the right answer. You know, the internet today is filled with junks. Everybody, almost everybody can contribute to can
Content.
contribute data. Okay, you have blogs and people and rumors and stuff like that. So things, people can make sincere mistakes. Okay, so that was Job's perception. He uttered what he actually did not know about God. So many times when people refer to Job chapter 1, Job chapter 2, and all of that, and they said, okay, God tempted Job and all of this, then I bring them back to Job chapter 42, verse 3. Look, this is the summary. Job himself discarded everything that he had said before he learned from God. Okay, so in Job chapter 42, verse 3, when he would respond to God, he said, who you asked, who is this who hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore, I have uttered that which I did not understand. Note that I did not understand. Things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. So that was Job's response. So I believe that this response of Job countered everything that is said in chapter 1 and chapter 2 about God contributing to his disaster.
Okay. All right. Yeah, and thank you very much for that introduction. It goes to show that Job had certain misconceptions about what he was passing through, right? So he didn't really
Yeah.
understand what he was going through, and then probably misjudged God. And then at the end of the day, he came to a realization of what was truly happening. But all those times before he came to the knowledge of what was happening to him, how would you say that
Okay.
God felt about the suffering that Job was going through? What was God's disposition to what Job was passing through? If you
Okay.
were to put yourself in that mindset, just studying from the scriptures.
All right. Thank you very much for asking that question. That is
Yeah.
a wonderful question. Okay. So what was going through the mind of God when Job was going through all of this? Number one, God was being patient with Job. Okay. And God is still so patient till today, because many times you have in law stuff like that. When you lie against the personality of someone, it is called a defamation of character. Okay,
Yeah.
so now when Job was going through all of these and he said God did this to him, God did that to him, what I mean, and the human sense, a human would have felt like, come on, let me defend myself and all of that. Okay, but it still happened today. People still blaspheme against God, and I mean all of that. Yet God is still patient and does not do anything to hurt them or anything. So for Job, God was only being patient with him. Despite the fact that Job was saying things that were not entirely true about the nature of God, God was patient with him. Okay, now the New Testament, which has the better explanation or better clarity about the nature of God, made us to understand something. Now, James, in James chapter 1, verse 13, okay, let me just open quickly.
All right. Okay. Meanwhile, as it's going through that, you guys can just send in your questions, drop it in the comment box, and we'll try as much as possible to answer the question. So just drop your comments. I saw that Kayode has dropped the comments. We'll definitely respond to that and display that. So before that, any other person that has any question or comment, you can drop it, and then we'll definitely make sure that we make reference to that. But now we're trying to understand pandemic suffering using Job as a case study. What was really happening to Job, and then what was God's disposition to what was happening to Job? I think that will give us a better background towards understanding the character of God in the face of suffering and pandemics. So, Abimbola, you're on.
Okay, thank you. So in James chapter 1, verse 13, James 1:13, James addressed the issue of Job, what Job said. So in verse 13, it says, let no man say when he's tempted that I am tempted of God. For God cannot be tempted with evil, neither does he tempt any man. Okay, so Job asserted that God tempted him, that God colluded with the devil to put him to a test and all of that. But thank God for the writers of the New Testament, where we have the clarity about the nature of God, that made us understand that, look, it is not the character of God to put people to test. Okay, now also in Job chapter 5, verse, did I say Job? James, don't mind me, James chapter 5.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to look at the verse. Okay. James 5:15.
Yeah.
Okay, you have the prayer of sick will the prayer of faith will heal the sick. Sorry, that's not the verse I'm looking for exactly.
Okay.
Okay, James 5:10. Yeah.
All right.
James 5:10 says, "My brethren, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord as an example of suffering and patience." 11, "For indeed we count them blessed who endured. You have heard of the perseverance of Job and seen the end intended by the Lord, that the Lord is very compassionate and merciful." I'm reading, that's the New King James Version. If
Yeah.
we read from, if we read from the normal King James Version, you would have God is pitiful. That is, God
Hmm.
pitied Job. So what God did to Job, I mean, God's reaction when Job was going through all that he was going through was pity and mercy. Okay, if you look at, I mean, if you read the book of Job alone, it would seem as though God was having a nice time tempting that guy. I mean, someone lost his family, lost his business, lost everything, and then probably you would imagine a God that had toothpick in his mouth and was just chilling. That this guy, let's just see what you would do, right? But the book of James made us to understand that what God had, I mean, or what God was doing was that He was patient. He had mercy on Job. He was pitiful of the guy's condition. God did not even
Hmm.
say, because the guy was defaming his character, saying the things that he was not, that he was going to punish the guy. No, because God understood that, okay, this guy is human, and it is normal for humans when they go through things. I mean, they just speak. They just speak against God. They challenge
Yeah.
status quo. They challenge their faith. Just like Abraham also told God that, God, it is me, your friend. You see me going childless. I mean, that was after God had told Abraham. I mean, if Abraham and God, if they saw each other as friends, as buddies, all right. Now, Abraham felt like, hey, God, and you claim I'm your friend, you claim we are close buddies, and you see that I'm going childless. Okay, so
Hmm.
God knows that when people go through tough times, they could speak things that they might not really mean, or they could speak things that they mean but is not true. It is just a reaction. It's their reaction to whatever it is that they were going through. So God had mercy on Job. He had patience on Job. All right. Now James chapter 5 verse 11 made us to understand that the end, I mean, the action of God in everything that Job went through was what he did in the end, which was restoration.
Hmm.
It was restoration. So
Okay.
I believe
All
that
right.
answers your question.
All right, thanks very much for that. So we could see that, one of the things we're trying to do here is to understand God's character in the face of suffering, in the face of pandemics and all that. And from what Abimbola just said, is that God feels pity, right? God feels compassion towards people when people are going through such circumstances. So it's not as if God is, in your word, using toothpick, right? And just chilling somewhere. Right? So God's very much concerned about what we are passing through or what people pass through. So it doesn't mean that because it seems as if there's no answer or the pain and the suffering is just there over and over again, that means God isn't concerned about it. God has pity. God is concerned about what we are going through. And then I think when we have that understanding, it can make us have a deeper understanding of the character of God, especially when people face some of these challenges. But then I want us to bring it to a more practical level now, right? Because we've talked about Job, we've talked about the disposition of the Bible, especially as you quoted in James concerning the character of God. But a lot of people cannot relate with some of these things. People who have experienced deep pain, and for some, it has left them rather disappointed, betrayed, right, or in doubt, just like Job and other. But even today, people do pass through some of these problems. You did mention that that has also led people to doubt the existence of God at some point, right? Um, but then, when you consider all what people are going through, you think God is an absentee God, right? That doesn't just care about what people is going on, because people want to see evidence, right? They they want to
Okay.
relate with something. They want answers, right? So how would you? Is God really fair when it seems as if everything is just quiet and then there are no answers to what people are going through?
Okay. Thank you. Um, when God created the world, He made natural principles. Okay.
Okay.
So, and when He made those principles, the intention of God was that man was going to be the ruler of the things He created in the earth realm or in the earth sphere.
Hmm.
Okay. So, really, when God made man in Genesis chapter 1, God used a tone or a language. God said, let them have dominion over the things of the heart. So
Yeah.
it would seem as though God exempted himself from the activities of the heart. Okay, now God is not exempting himself actually, but what he did was to actually put man in charge of the things that he had created. Okay,
Okay.
if we read the book of Hebrews chapter 1, the author of Hebrews was quoting Psalms also. He said that what is man that thou art mindful of him, for you have placed him over the creation of your hands. Okay, so now these natural principles are there in the world. Many times man trigger those there is a law that is called the law of cause and effect. The law of cause and effect is something that you would it's like Newton's third law, which says that for every action there is always an equal and opposite reaction. Okay,
Yeah.
that's what will happen if, because of the way the world is today, someone goes to steal a stuff in the market. Now, the reaction of people to his steal, to his theft, is that they would probably kill him, probably beat him up, probably lynch him. That's the order of the natural world. People who really don't have the consciousness of God and stuff like that. Okay, so it's
Yeah.
just a cause and effect. Now, for this guy that stole, would he say when people beat him, would he say that is God punishing him? Where
Not
is
possible.
God when people were punishing him?
Okay.
Okay, it is
Yeah.
also like I mean, it is just what you would have today as well. Now, if they say that don't do this, okay, or if you don't know how to swim, don't go near a river or probably a sea or an ocean, and then someone feels like, you know what, I'll just go, I'll go, I will go. Then he goes on, jumps into the ocean, thinking somehow supernaturally he would be delivered.
Hmm.
Okay,
Okay.
now
Yeah.
by nature, the survival instinct of being in water is being able to waddle your hands and legs so that you can stay afloat and then you don't get carried away by the tides of the ocean, or you don't get drowned. Now, if this guy does not have this surviving skill and then he drowns, ask me, where is God? Okay, so
And that's
there
a
are
lot of
certain
questions people
principles.
ask.
Yeah, so there are certain principles in the world that God has set in place. And people need to understand that we just have to play by them. We have to abide by them. Okay, can miracles happen? Yeah, miracles can happen. But like the name is, it is miracle. It is not the norm.
Right.
Miracle is when the supernatural interferes in the affairs of the natural. Sorry, I'm not trying to sound redeeming
No, no,
or
it
or
makes
stuff like
absolute
that.
sense.
It's
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's just the supernatural comes to the aid of the natural, of someone in the natural. So that
Hmm.
is the miracle. That is what the miraculous is. Come on, if miracles happen every time, we would not believe in God.
True. True. Yeah.
If things outside the normal keep happening every time, we would not believe that there is actually a realm of the spirit.
Hmm.
Okay, but if God keeps doing this, that okay, miracles happen, miracles happen, miracles happen. Now it would seem as though God is trying to prove himself, and as though he's not actually self-sufficient. That would mean God himself did not trust the principles that he put in place when he created the world. Okay, so people have to understand that the earlier we understand the principles of the world and abide by the ones that can be lived by, then the better it is for everyone. Okay, so it's possible that miracles happen. Yeah, miracles happen. I am a fan of the supernatural. I have done a number of miracles by the grace of God. The supernaturals that happened through my hands, through my words and stuff before. Okay, but also I understand that the supernatural only comes to play in certain instances. Now, people go through challenges, they go through situations that are tough, and the first question they ask is, God, where are you? There is a popular Nigerian, there is this popular Nigerian scholar, but I think he's dead now, who said, okay, I think he was so busy, and I'm not so sure about what happened, but he said that he was not going to read for an exam. So he said that if he failed, then that means there is no God truly. Wow. And to the glory of God, the guy failed. And sorry to say, to the glory of God, I'm just being sarcastic. Okay, I'm not saying God is pleasing his failure. Yeah. Okay, but the guy failed, and that ended the journey of his faith. That's right in Nigeria some years ago, even before we have the group of atheists or agnostic that we have in the world today, in Nigeria today. Okay, so where was God when that guy failed? If you ask me, then I ask people, where was God when people killed Jesus? Because when people go through tough times, they just think about themselves that, okay, that means God has forgotten me. That means God has abandoned me. That means stuff are happening to me, and God does not care. Now, my question is, Jesus, that the Bible portrays to be the Son of God or to be the manifestation of God in the flesh, where was God when this guy was killed? Trust me, Jesus did not die a simple death, right? True. Someone who had to carry a piece of wood from one end of the town to another. He was so tired that someone had to help him. They had to put a crown of thorn on his head. He was beaten with stripes. They tore his clothes, made him almost naked in the public. So where was God when Jesus was going through all of this? So we just have to understand that suffering is a part of the world today because the world is fallen, or because the world has fell. Okay, by the world is fallen, I don't mean that, okay, the world fell because of Adam. That's just the bottom line. The world fell because of Adam. Okay, so if we read Genesis chapter 1, verse 31, we would understand that at the end of creation, God looked at everything that he made and he said they were good, right? Yeah, so many people believe that God created evil. Now, if God created evil, that means God saw evil as being good in Genesis 1:31. And in Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2, you would repeatedly have God saw that the things he had created are good. For example, when he made light in Genesis 1:3, it was good. Okay, then there are other places where God looked at his creation and he said they were good. Now, if God saw evil as being good, then that means God himself, he has an impaired sight. Why? Because if man that he created knew that evil was bad, or that evil is bad, then the creator himself had an issue with his sight to see evil as being good. You get?
Yes, very well.
So God did not create evil. Adam did. In Romans chapter 5, verse 12, we're made to understand that by one man, sin entered into the world. Okay, and the language that the Bible was written originally, the New Testament was written originally in the Greek. So the word entered in the Greek is the word esekomai, E-I-S-E-C-H-O-M-A-I, right? And esekomai means an introduction or a first entrance. So when when Adam sinned, he introduced death into the world. Adam introduced sin into the world. It was not the creation of God. You remember that God already told Adam in the beginning that, look, if you choose not to take of the tree of life, and you take of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, then you will die. It says, in death you will die. Meaning that of a truth, Adam was going to die. So that day that Adam disobeyed, he died spiritually, and also he created the physical death. So although he did not die physically until years later, but we know that he created physical death. Okay, that's one. Also in Romans chapter 8, verse 18, let me read that. I think I would stop the answer to this question at that point. Romans chapter 8, verse 18. Yeah. So Paul says, for I consider the sufferings of these present times are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. For the earnest, okay, so that means there is a suffering in this present time, right? Now, if Paul said us, that means even Paul, the great apostle, was going through hard times. Okay, although for Paul, the hard times in this context was usually the persecutions he had against the gospel.
Yeah.
Okay, so that means nobody, if Jesus suffered, then nobody is exempted from suffering. Not because God ordained us to suffering, but because that is what the world has become. Okay, so it says that the suffering of this present times is not to be compared with the glory that shall be revealed in us, verse 19, for the earnest expectation of the creation eagerly waits for the manifestation of the sons of God. Now, creations would refer to other things that were created by God.
Right.
Okay, so that means they await the manifestation of the sons of God. The sons of God are the people that are saved. Okay, now I know that people have termed this particular verse to mean that maybe God wants to show a glory in my life. God wants to do a miracle in my life, and stuff like that. But no, that's not actually what this verse is talking about. Okay, so the verse is talking about, if you read verse 18, it says that a glory is supposed to be revealed in us. Okay, now verse 20, it says, for the creation was subject to vanity, not willingly. That is, the things that were made by God, everything was subjected to vanity willingly. That means it was not, God did not create them as such.
Yeah.
Okay, so it says, but because of him who subjected it in hope. Who was the him? The him was the first man. So Adam was the one that brought about the creation of an evil world. Adam was the source of evil. So in the world, you can say that there are two creators. Number one, the first creator is God, who created things that are good and perfect. The second creator is man, okay, who created certain things based on, who created things that he thinks are good, which may be good and may be bad. Okay, now, I know that some people believe, because of evil, some people don't believe in God, really. Now, a simple question is just that, even in the natural world, we know that for everything that is made, there is always a source, there is always a creator. Someone started the concept of phone, that is Sir Alexander Graham Bell. Okay, someone started the internet, someone created TVs and computers and all the stuff we have today. So behind every creation, there is actually a creator. So when people ask me, what is the proof that God exists? It is simple. I don't try too much to make them see. Just learn from nature. Just learn from nature. If nature tells you that there is always a creator to certain things, then that means there is also a greater power that created what we have in the world today. It's that simple. Okay, so Romans 8:20 again says, for the creation was subject to futility, not willingly, but because of him that subjected it in hope. 21, for the creation itself will be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the children of God. Now, the creation, like I said, are the things that were made by God, or the things that exist. Now, there is also a liberation for them. There is a deliverance for them. And the deliverance will happen when the sons of God are delivered. Now, if we read verse 23, we would actually understand that the manifestation is the redemption of our body. So the manifestation of the sons of God that you have in Romans chapter 8, verse 19 is not a sudden miracle or a sudden glory. It is actually the manifestation of a redeemed body, which will happen when Jesus would come. So what Paul tries to tell us is that, look, suffering will be in this world for as long as possible until the saints are redeemed in the body, which is at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ.
All right, thank you very much
Yeah.
for that elaborate. You've actually answered some of the other questions that I was going to ask later on, but then one of the things I would like us to consider, there's this phrase, they say acts of God, right? You did mention that in your previous comment that some of the things that happen in the world is as a result of the consequences of our actions as individuals,
Yes,
right?
sir. Yes, sir.
So maybe you do certain things that has consequences or so, and then it gets to affect the state of life in which you live in. But then there's what people have generally termed acts of God, what you cannot really pin to any individual, right? And say this individual is responsible for that. I mean, earthquakes for one, right? Tornadoes for another one. Those are things that are called acts of God. So
Okay.
right. So how do we understand that, especially in light of God's character? Because yeah, we can go ahead and say man sinned, right? And as a result of the
Okay.
sin, these are the consequences of our actions, right? But then
Okay.
why would God continually allow these things to happen, especially things like act of God that man is not directly right responsible? At least I'm not talking about Adam this in this case, but at least what human beings in general as we live today might not be responsible for things like earthquakes. So how do these things go on being, and how can people get to understand why this happen? I know you've already touched some of this in your previous response, but just
Okay.
to
Yeah.
elaborate on it.
Okay. Thank you. Personally, I won't call those things the acts of God. Number one,
Okay.
I have tried so much to all through my years in learning God's word and in growing in ministry, I have learned so much to stick to the terms that the Bible uses concerning certain things. Okay, so the acts of God might not be my favorite or my choicest word for natural
Okay.
disaster. Okay, so
Yeah.
in this case, I would just borrow the terminology of science that calls them natural disasters. Okay,
Yeah.
so natural disasters, like the name is, they are just natural. They are consequences of the fallen earth. Okay. Recently, although I'm sorry about this, but I don't like to. One of the things I don't like to do is to use science to answer the biblical questions. Okay, but
Yes.
we cannot deny the fact that science has some truth about the world in it, right? Okay,
Mm.
so um, recently I was doing a work for someone. I was working with
Yeah.
for certain people, and then I was reading up on global warming and different stuff. So I got to understand that much more disasters, much more natural disasters will still happen as a result of global warming.
Okay.
Example is that there was still going to be flood, a lot of floods that might claim
Yeah.
lives, properties, spoil things. Okay, there are as a matter of fact, right now there are unpredictable weather. We have unpredictable weather. Climate is becoming so they call it climate change. Okay, more heavy precipitation will happen and stuff like that. Now, global warming, global warming is a concept by science, but we know that the implication or it came about actually by the activities of men, right?
Yeah.
So they say global warming happens by greenhouse gases and stuff like that that they form a thin layer above in the atmosphere, such that the ultraviolet ray of the sun coming to Earth that is supposed to leave the planet is not leaving, because this layer of gases are trapping them somehow. It's trapping, them to a great extent. Now, that is
Yeah.
why the world is becoming hotter. Okay, and you know that actually the whole world has been complaining recently about heat more than it used to be in years ago and stuff. Okay, so
Yeah.
one of my discoveries while working was that there are actually some active volcanoes that are covered by ice. Okay, so those volcanoes are there buried in the fault of the earth, but ice stays above them, not making them happen. Okay, now with global warming, those ice or those layers of ice are beginning to wear off. They're beginning to melt. Okay, now why is it melting? Global warming. Why global warming? The actions of men. Okay, so it's more like some of them are cause and effect. Okay, now if these ice melt, then that means the active volcano under the crust would come to the surface, and then we would have another natural disaster happen. Okay, so I'm not trying to, I wouldn't say God is responsible for this. What I just
Yeah.
want people to know is that natural disasters happen because the earth fell.
Okay. All right.
Okay?
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah, so natural disaster happen because the earth fell. So that's just it.
All right. Okay. So basically, summary is man saying the earth fell, and there are also some actions, right, like global warming that contribute to global warming. Man's actions that goes on to
Yeah, there are man's
support
actions
or
that contribute to
encourage
some of
to
those natural disasters.
natural disasters. Yeah. Very well. So just a quick advice. What would you advise people on how to deal with pain and suffering, right? What should be their response when someone is going through a hard time? What should be the first
Okay.
thing that comes to their mind, and how should they respond to the situation in which they are in at the moment?
Okay, thank you. So if people go through hard time, the first thing I want them to know is to trust the character of God as Jesus has explained to us. Now, as Jesus has explained to us. Why? Because Jesus is the perfect revelation of God. Okay, now there are actions that were done in the Old Testament that would have been attributed to God. But when Jesus came, he made us see differently. Okay, now man would think, or before Jesus came, many people thought that okay, when when they go through pain and suffering, it is
Yeah.
actually God punishing them. Okay, but when we read the book of Luke, chapter 6, okay, Matthew also, chapter 5, Luke chapter 6, Matthew chapter 5, we would get to understand that Jesus said that God is actually kind to the unthankful and merciful to the wicked. He made rain to fall both on the good and evil. So the character of God is unchanging. We just have to know that God does not have a bipolar disorder. This moment is all good, and then the next moment is all bad. No. Now, another thing was in the Old Testament, people would have thought that, okay, maybe some people that acted out of anger, they were acting by the commands of God. For example, Elijah. Elijah told the prophets of Baal to call down fire, and that he was going to call on his God to call down fire. Now, the prophets of Baal made attempt, nothing happened. Elijah prayed, fire came down. Now, in the justifiable sense of humans, isn't it okay? Isn't that enough proof that the God of Elijah is the true God? In that the challenge was call down fire, whoever brings down fire worships the true God. It
Exactly.
was that simple. Now, Elijah had to proceed to kill those people. Was it about 7,000 prophets? I'm not
Yeah.
sure about the number now. Now, if you ask me, that was not something that happened supernaturally. He killed them by the edge of the sword. That means although Elijah was a prophet, he was also a skilled swordsman. God did not send him to kill those people, but he did. Later in the book of John, when people would not believe Jesus, James and John told Jesus, Master, they did not believe you. Do you know what? Should we call down fire like Elijah called down fire and destroyed people in the Old Testament? The response of Jesus was, hey, guys, calm down. You don't know what manner of spirit that you are made of. You have to tell them that, look, that means the Spirit of God is not about destruction, but about salvation. Okay, so now I want people, when people go through hard times, what I want them to see is that the character of God is consistent in the fact that God wants to help them. Look, it does not make sense if we think God is punishing us with evil and we are still trusting him to deliver us out of the same evil. It does not make sense. It does not make sense when we think God is capable of evil and we are looking up to him for miracles in light of goodness. It does not make sense. So if we want miracles, when you ask people if they want miracles, it is always good miracles, right? Nobody wants bad miracles. Okay, so if you expect miracles from God, then you have to settle your mind by knowing and believing that God is only capable of goodness. He's only capable of doing good. So when you go through challenges, I want you to know that God, like he did to Job, is he's compassionate. He has a caring heart. In the book of Hebrews, is it Hebrews now? Hebrews 2, let me confirm that. Hebrews chapter 2.
So you guys can keep your question coming in. We'll soon round up. We have just about 9 more minutes to go. So we'll try as much as possible to respond to your questions if you do drop your questions.
Okay, so Hebrews 2:27, therefore in all things he had made him like his brethren, that he might be a merciful and faithful high priest in things pertaining to God, to make propitiation of sins for the people. Right, now this is Jesus representing us before God. Okay, now also the same book of Hebrews made us to understand that we do not have an high priest that cannot be touched by our infirmities, meaning that Jesus understood what we go through, or he understands what we go through, because he himself, he was a man. He knew what it was to be tempted. He knew what it was to suffer persecution, to feel hunger. Okay, now he understands, therefore he will carry you through. Look, if you are going through hard times, I want you to know that you just have to keep believing in God. Okay, sometimes miracles might not come in the sense that you would supernaturally be delivered out of situations. For example, Paul and his colleague, was it Paul and Silas now, in the book of Acts 15, I think, they praised God, right? They praised God in the prison, and then their chains broke off. Now, in the natural sense, who would that happen to? And nothing that, come on, this is a miracle, let me just run off. As a matter of fact, the warder was sleeping. But what did they do? They stayed in the prison. That was a commitment to show that, look, it is not about whether we escape prison or not. We will hold on to our faith. When Agabus gave a prophecy to Paul that when he gets to Jerusalem, he was actually going to be bound and be delivered to prison and all of that. Now, we would have taken that word of knowledge as, okay, if God is giving me this word, then he wants me to run away. Now, to Paul, that meant that the prophecy would mean that, okay, if he wants to take the prophecy seriously, it would mean that God is trying to tell him not to go to Jerusalem. But why was he going to Jerusalem? It was to preach the gospel, right? So he had to tell the prophet. The prophet was not lying, because that was what actually happened to Paul eventually. Okay, so Paul told the prophet that he was not willing to get to Jerusalem alone, but to be bound and to be killed. That shows the commitment of a man that is sold out to the cause of God, that no matter what happens, I will hold on to God. And that is what he wants us to understand also when he wrote the book of Romans chapter 8, verse 18. It says that the suffering of these current times are nothing to be compared with the glory that shall be revealed in us. We suffer today because we are in the natural world. But when we are in the spiritual world, we will suffer with Christ.
Okay. Hello. Abimbola is having some issues with his network connection. So just give me a little more seconds to see if he would reconnect. Um, are you there, Abimbola? Okay. So basically, what he's just trying to say is that whenever we pass through problems, right? Suffering. We shouldn't see it as if it's God that is responsible. God's not responsible for evil. God's only responsible for good. When He created the world in the beginning, He saw that everything that He did create was good, right? So whatever God creates is good. So we shouldn't feel that God is responsible for whatever suffering that we're going through. God is compassionate, and so when we face troubles, when we face challenges, we should have the mindset that God wants the best for us. And no matter what is happening, when a world whereby a lot of natural laws, a lot of phenomenon can actually work against us, but in spite of all that, God is still working for us, working with us to make sure that things get better. Okay, Abimbola has joined us back. Yeah, I think he had a network connection issues. Yeah.
Okay, so like I was saying, in Job chapter 3, verse 19, Jesus said that
Yeah.
people would persecute and people would always respond to light in a negative way because they love darkness. Okay. So sometimes you would go through hard times not because you are bad, not because God wants to correct you, but because it is just the language. I mean, evil is just the language that men without the consciousness of God know. Right?
Mm.
I tell people sometimes, I tell people many times that bad things happen to good people because the world does not depend on good people alone. There are bad people in the world. I mean, if you are the only person in the world, I bet it with you that you may not have a reason to be frustrated at certain things that certain times. So
Yeah.
it's just a part of the world, okay? And it happens. It just happens. Not because God wants to punish people. It's just part of the fallen earth.
Okay. Thanks so much for that. Just in a few seconds, what would you say? Now we've addressed how people should deal with pain and suffering, right? But what about those who have already given up on God as a result of this suffering? What would you advise them? How would you address that particular issue? Just within a few seconds.
Within a few seconds, okay, since you said within a
Yeah.
few seconds,
Yes.
actually, I don't
So we could
take it
keep
like
to
this
time.
without quoting
Okay,
from the
okay,
scriptures.
just take your time. I think people will want full explanation.
Um, so what's the question again? Remind me now. I didn't
So
get it.
people who have already given up on God as a result of this suffering that they've passed through, what advice will you give to such people?
What advice will I give to such people? Okay,
Yeah.
number one is they. Okay, first, there is always a part of man that looks forward to hope, that looks forward to brighter side. And the truth is, if there is no greater power, there is no point in having that hope to looking up to a brighter side of life. Okay. So for people who have given up on God or who don't believe in the existence of God, you know, the fact that you still have hope that certain things can happen is still the fact it's a pointer or is a pointer to the fact that a part of you still hopes something better than even what is within your immediate reach. Okay. And that means that the real is the greater power. Okay. Now the second thing is if you still believe in God while going through this suffering, but you have given up on God as it were, then I would advise that that you go back to study the character of God. And by studying the character of God, I want you to study the life of Jesus. I want you to study the life of Jesus. Just see Jesus as the perfect representation of God. See Jesus as the perfect representation of God. in Hebrews chapter 1, reading from verse 1 to verse 3, in verse 3, the Bible says that Jesus is the express image of God. Is the brightness express of his image. So Jesus is the expression of God. If you really want to understand who God is, then you have to look at Jesus. Not even the testimony of people that live in the Old Testament, because some of them are shady. Just like Job, some of them, their opinion about God are sincere ignorance. Okay. So you look at the life of Jesus, consider his lifestyle. How did Jesus respond to things? How did he relate with people? How did he give? Was he violent? Was he peaceful? What did he explain about God and stuff like that? So I believe that going to, if you still have faith in God, then studying the life of Jesus is what you should focus on right now.
Okay. Thank you very much. You did all that in just about time. So we've learned a lot from you today. We really want to appreciate you for coming on the show. So what we're trying to do is actually to have conversations around issues that a lot of people do consider or think about, but others, there's no way that others can actually share in the same thoughts with them. So basically the simple things about life, pain, hope, love, right? Things that people want, happiness, right? So we're looking out for ways in which we could have conversations around it so that people know that even when they're going through suffering, they are not alone. And then the fact that they're going through suffering doesn't mean that that's the end of the world. So you shouldn't give up on God. You should still continue hoping. You should continue trusting that. Look at the life of Jesus Christ. How did he respond to people who were going through such situations? The story of Lazarus was a similar example in John, where he said that Jesus wept, right, because of Lazarus, his friend's death. So it goes to show that he has that compassion, right? It's not just somebody who's just there in your word using toothpick, right? It's somebody who can weep for whatever situations that we are going through and is willing to do something about that. So this subsequently we'll be having other conversations, maybe with Abimbola some other time, but with other people as well to talk about things that are simple, things like happiness, things like love, right? To drive conversations around this and then have people to be able to define their meaning and their purpose in life and have a better outlook about what is really happening in the society. So Abimbola, really want to thank you once again for joining us. I think we are 2 minutes ahead of the scheduled time, but yes, thank you once again for joining the show.
Have we answered everyone's question?
I am having problems seeing their questions actually. So so that's one of the problems. So I guess we'll just respond to it offline by responding to the comments after this live session. So then other people can just go ahead to the comment section and read the responses to that. So
Okay. Okay,
yeah,
that's fine.
yeah.
So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it was nice having you, and I've personally learned a lot, and I believe that those watching as well have actually learned a lot from today. So we'll keep doing this small, maybe once in a week or once in 2 weeks, and then we'll see what we can derive from all these conversations. Thank you once again.
Okay.
Good,
All right,
goodbye,
sir.
everyone. Yes.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.